So a friend of mine recommended your book 3 years ago, Jay, and his colleague and close friend um, read your book, did the teachings, followed all the teachings, and he suffered for all his life from asthma. And then everything, all the symptoms of it were gone. He went to the doctor, and his doctor signed a clean bill of health. And he said, it's a miracle. I don't know what you have down. It's a miracle. So my first question is, what happens here?
I suppose there's a few different things. We have to recognize that people with asthma will breathe typically a little bit faster and harder, and often through their mouth. So they're taking cold, dry, unfiltered air into their lungs, which is going to aggravate the airways. They often bypass their mouth, so they're not harnessing nasal nitric oxide. Nitric oxide from the nose is a bronchodilator. It's antiviral. It helps to redistribute the blood throughout the lungs. And also by breathing lighter and lower and slower, you don't traumatize the airways as much. So in the main, people with asthma, when they're having their symptoms, and even when they're not having their symptoms, their breathing pattern can be feeding into their condition. And what we do is we highlight that and address hyperventilation and improve breathing efficiency.
And then a doctor could say, like, this is a miracle. What happened here?
Not always.
Not always.
Yeah, there's some people who do. Some people who completely can alleviate their asthma. We have to consider that asthma, if you have it over a period of time, there may be some residual scar tissue or whatever. So, but at the same time, we would normally expect a reduction of symptoms of about 50% in 2 weeks. And the clinical trials typically show a reduction of the need for medication, inhaled corticosteroid medication, of about 50% in 3 to 6 months. But even if we were to think of that we can improve the quality of life of the person with asthma, and we can significantly help them to reduce their need for medication. There's something positive in that. It's quite interesting, Özlem, because Ireland, for example, has a very high rate of asthma.
Yeah.
And yet, even though we have been teaching this since 2002, it hasn't always been embraced, put it that way. And it's unfortunate that the authorities that work with asthma don't always want to know of a breathing technique, or don't even want to investigate it, because the key is, if somebody with asthma is going around with their mouth open, why are they breathing through their mouth? Their mouth does nothing, and by breathing through the mouth, it's going to aggravate their asthma, and that should be the first step. And there's no harm in doing that. There's no side effects in encouraging people to do simple breathing techniques, and it could help them a lot.
Yeah. So, let's actually break it a little bit down. If we look at the physiology of breathing, what happens exactly with our body, in our body, when we breathe?
The primary driver to breathe is carbon dioxide. So there's a gas that's produced by our metabolism. So we as human beings, we eat food, and we breathe in air. And when food and oxygen meets, it generates energy. And a byproduct of the generation of energy is water and carbon dioxide. So we produce this gas, carbon dioxide, internally. Carbon dioxide goes from the tissues into the blood. And as carbon dioxide increases in the blood and blood pH drops, the brain reacts by sending the message to breathe. So the primary driver to breathe, every breath that we are taking right now, is driven by carbon dioxide. But some people are overly sensitive to the gas carbon dioxide than others. And those people who are overly sensitive will have faster and harder breathing patterns. They will feel, for example, when they do physical exercise, that they run out of air. They might feel that they can't take a satisfying breath. So really, the whole aspect of breathing is that oftentimes people feel that breathing is driven by oxygen. It's not, unless your oxygen levels drop by about 50%. It's driven by carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide isn't just a waste gas, but performs a number of very important functions in the human body. So, for example, it's very common with people with poor breathing to have cold hands and cold feet, to have brain fog, and our blood circulation is influenced. And we have 50,000 miles of blood vessels in the human body, so about 70,000 kilometers thereabouts. That's influenced by how hard and how fast we breathe. And we have to dispel the idea that the more air you bring into your body, the more oxygen that gets delivered to your tissues and organs. That's not correct. You need a certain amount of oxygen, of course, but you also need a certain amount of carbon dioxide. And if you breathe too hard and too fast, you remove too much carbon dioxide from the lungs, and this in turn reduces carbon dioxide in the blood leaving the lungs. As carbon dioxide in the blood is reduced, blood vessels constrict, There's a left shift of what's called the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve, but less oxygen gets delivered throughout the body. So the harder and faster one person breathes, the less oxygen that's delivered, and the more likely that they are tipped into an increased stress response, increased sympathetic drive.
Actually, over breathing is kind of harming our body.
Yes,